Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 277 of Humanity Rising. Thank you, first of all, for your patience and flexibility yesterday. We had a new time. We've been all week, as you know, coordinating with World Unity Week and started the session 30 minutes earlier, which we've never done actually at Humanity Rising, and that caused some technical confusion with Zoom. So thank you, everyone, for your patience. We had a marvelous session with young people from all over the world that were coordinated through the United Religions Initiative that was initiated some 20 years ago by Bishop Swing of the Episcopal Church in San Francisco. Then that rolled into a splendid dialogue between Chief Phil Lyons and Jane Goodall on the ecology and how we can revitalize the human spirit at this time. Today, we will continue our partnership with World Unity Week by honoring once again the extraordinary work of Stan Grof and Brigitte Grof. And so we will talk about that in a moment. But first, as we always do, let's just take a moment and center ourselves. Center yourself in your body. Take a breath or two and listen to your heartbeat. Attune yourself to your heart for just a minute in a spirit of gratitude and thanksgiving that you're alive, that we're all alive at this most extraordinary moment in the human journey. Thank you, everyone. And now with an open heart and a heart full of gratitude and love for each and every one of you joining our session today, I want to comment as we begin our program that the unity that humanity seeks right now is the unity required to go through the birth canal from a world that is receding to a world that is being born. It's a moment of unity and transition. It's a moment of danger without and strength within. It's a moment when all of us must gather together, understanding that we will only make it through the birth canal if we transit with a single intention, to collectively, together, with one purpose, to birth a new global civilization. No one has contemplated what is required for this journey more than Stan Grof. Now in his 90th year, he'll be celebrating his 90th birthday next week on July 1st. And as you know, every month since January, we have been honoring Stan as really one of the titans, I would say, one of the giants of our time. At one level, a successor to Freud and Jung in the domains of psychology, but much more fundamentally, a psychonaut, a voyager into the unknown, who's crafted a metaphysic, an understanding of reality that knits the human psyche, not only with the journey that all of us take in the wombs of our mother and down through the birth canal and out into a new world, like a caterpillar going through a chrysalis and becoming a butterfly, but how the psychic journey of humanity is linked to the planetary alignments and our solar system and the cosmos beyond. So today, Stan and Brigitte are going to be in dialogue with Rick Tarnas, one of the great astrologers of our time, whose book, Cosmos and Psyche, is really a monumental work. So that's what our program has today. And to initiate our program, as she has since January, is Susan Hess-Loger, the director and producer of the film, the documentary film, Voyage of the Psychonaut, which is on Stan's life. She has really single-handedly created this series on Humanity Rising. So Susan, thank you, and welcome to convene our program today.
So much. This has been an amazing series of tributes to Stan beginning in January. It allowed me to go back into the documentary that I had worked on for 7 years with Stan Grof and his wife Brigitte, and to give a chance for each of the visionaries that had introduced during Stan's 14 years at Esalen as scholar in residence, the ideas that they have contributed to our new paradigm of science, actually. We've covered biology and quantum physics. We've explored non-ordinary states of consciousness, how to access those states, how to support them, whether through breath work or through psychedelic exploration. And most recently, we've explored archetypal astrology and really looked at the importance and the power of archetypes as forces that are really influencing human behavior here on Earth and have been active throughout history through the work actually of our guest today, Richard Tarnas, who in his book Cosmos and Psyche tracked 3,000 years of our history through the lens of the planetary transits and uncovered these patterns that unfold in a spiral nature, sort of coming back around to revisit themes that were introduced going over hundreds, if not thousands of years. So this is a wonderful opportunity to bring together Richard Tarnas and Stan Grof, who together, it's been 47 years actually, their collaboration, meeting first at Esalen and evolving this understanding of the importance of the archetypes. And in the documentary, I really focused on Stan's contributions, and I didn't have the capacity to hear Stan and what he was saying about the archetypes. So today, we're also going to be sharing a clip from one of my interviews with Stan, where he goes in depth about this. And then Richard Tarnas, or Rick Tarnas, joins us to elaborate on that. He has written so eloquently about it in the epilogue of The Way of the Psychonaut, volumes 1 and 2. And so without wasting any more time, it is my great pleasure to introduce Stan Grof and his wife, Brigitte. And I should mention that Stan and Brigitte have been married now for over 6 years, and after a very long collaboration. And together recently, they have formed the Grof Legacy Training. And this is so that Stan's work can be carried on forward. So welcome, Stan and Brigitte. I'm so happy to have you join us today.
Well, thank you very, very much. Jim,
Your
for
camera is not on, Brigitte.
It is. It takes a little bit. Sorry. So start again.
Yes.
The camera is on now. It wasn't on.
So welcome, Stan.
Yes, thank you very much, Jim, for allowing this ubiquity to make this ongoing bursting for me. And also,
Pleasure.
Susan, having this ongoing amazing experiences with you that you're bringing. So we are doing the last one before the end of the birth, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
So I will do everything that I always say. I have to say that about 3 years ago, I had a stroke. I didn't have
Paralysis.
no paralysis. I don't think it hit my mind, but very, very badly hit me my speech. And so this is very amazing for me that I have Brigitte here, that when I will need a word somewhere, she will help me. She probably knows everything that I know.
No. Not really, but some.
We know each other now over 35 years, yeah. And since the time when we met in Germany, and then when Rita stayed in Estland for a year, and then doing also a lot of works in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And now for 6 years we have a reunion, and now over 5 years of
Married.
We got married, yeah. So I don't know, would you like to say something yourself?
No, I'm very happy to be here and to be with all of you. It's been just an amazing time, almost half a year now where we've been doing this, and it's a pleasure and an honor to be with all of you, and I'm happy to help. So.
She is just an amazing wife, friend, and all kinds of other things.
Okay, thank you. Thank
Yes.
you so much. Thank you, sweetheart. So I'm also looking forward to see you, Rick, again. We actually met at Estland 35 years ago. So it's a great pleasure to be together in this.
I know that in your film, I said that I didn't expect that the last time of my years, think to Brigitte, this is the most beautiful time of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the best I can say.
Oh, such a sweetheart. Thank you.
Well, and I think you're very blessed, Stan, because Brigitte, you understand the breath work. You were one of the first students. You've been teaching it and offering it in your own practice in Germany. And so with the Grof Legacy Training, it's an amazing possibility of carrying this work forward. So I just am so grateful to both of you. And the film would not have been made without your participation, Brigitte. So you were amazing all throughout. Well, let's bring in Richard Tarnas. I'm going to
Okay,
quickly
great.
read his biography. So, Richard Tarnas is a professor of philosophy and cultural history at the California Institute of Integral Studies in San Francisco, where he founded the graduate program in philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness. He has worked with Stan Grof since 1974 when they first met at Esalen Institute. And together they have taught graduate seminars at CIIS as well as workshops around the world. Rick is also the author of The Passion of the Western Mind and Cosmos and Psyche. And Cosmos and Psyche is actually the basis for an upcoming documentary series called The Changing of the Gods. He is also a past president of the International Transpersonal Association and served on the board of governors for the C.G. Jung Institute of San Francisco. Welcome, Rick Tarnas. It's so wonderful to have you here.
Thank you, Susan. It's always a privilege to be in such a special group with Stan and Brigitte, Jim, and you. And happy to be celebrating this huge milestone in Stan's life. And if it's in Stan's life, it's in my life too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 47 years. That's an incredibly long time.
Yeah. It's hard to believe. Hard to believe we're that old. But yeah, it was many decades ago at Esalen Institute. I came to Esalen to meet and work with Stan, and ended up living there I lived there for another 10 years, became director of programs. But of all the great teachers that were at Esalen, and there were a lot of great teachers, Joseph Campbell and Houston Smith, and Fritjof Capra, of course, came, and many others. But it was Stan who had the treasure that I was hoping to learn more about. And it's been, well, Stan, I can just speak directly to you. It's just been one of the great privileges of my life, really, to have you as my teacher, as my friend, colleague, all the lectures and travels and all around the world that we've done to present our joint work. In the beginning, it was just a privilege just to be learning from you, and then, as destiny would have it, it turned out that we each had a kind of part of a larger perspective that worked, that was so mutually enhancing, that turned out that we had a lot to teach together. So yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Okay, so go ahead,
sorry.
Stan.
It was just amazing, when Rick and I got together. He came to Esalen, and we worked together on his dissertation. And the only place on all of Esalen was found was in the same house at the top, under our. So now,
so where I
if you
stayed
look
at,
what happened.
I was just going to explain that where when I decided to not just be taking seminars, but actually to live and stay at Esalen longer term, what Stan is saying is that the one open space where I could rent a suite was in the under the lower level of Stan's own house there, right in just a few minutes walk from it was part of Esalen's property. And so yeah, we just had that tremendous it was one of those little karmic coincidences that allowed it.
I think what you have done, over the years together, I see it really as fate or karma, if you want.
Script.
It's quite amazing.
Yeah, and a gift for me. So, Susan, would you like me to share a little more about our work together, or do we want to show a couple of clips first, and then we go from there?
Yes. So we're going to show a brief clip from my interview with Stan, where prior to making, really getting going with the movie, I was interviewing Stan every chance I had. And so this is a brief moment from one of those conversations.
So today I believe that if you have a psychedelic session, if you have a spiritual emergency, or powerful experiences in meditation, that it activates the field, archetypal field that reflects the transits that you have at the time. And then within that realm, you can get some biographical material that has that archetypal flavor, or the corresponding perinatal matrix, or some past life experiences or archetypal experiences. So it's really the realm, the archetypal realm, that determines what kind of experiences would be coming up.
And so anyway, that I felt was just beautiful. And I wish I'd been able to hear that more clearly, but perhaps I had to go through a lot of courses at CIIS and that Rick had, created so that I would understand what you were saying at that moment. And now before we get into the rest of this conversation, we're going to play a clip from the documentary where you, Rick Tarnas, talk about how you see this current challenge facing humanity.
Well, I obviously wanted to say something, but
Are we? I think we're ready for it. Yes.
I think people who are in touch with the state of the world right now recognize that we're basically all skating on thin ice. There is a profound sense of uncertainty and potentially looming danger of catastrophic proportions. And it takes a lot of courage to face that. We can't simply be sure we can be bringing in some technological fix or rational solution to the situation. Uncertainty itself is a key part of any initiatory transformation. You can't have a pretend near-death experience in order to have an effective transfiguration of how you live. You need to really feel everything is at stake and you don't know the outcome. And if we can have the courage to face that and to go through this dark night of the soul in some sense, and to bring all our wits and heart and imagination and bravery together to engage this great threshold, I think that's the key to our future.
So putting those two things together is really the basis of our conversation today, because much of your work, Rick, has been exploring these planetary transits and the influence that they have on humanity. And so I would love now to really explore what Stan introduced in that brief clip, was the idea that it's the archetypes that are really behind any other experiences we might have. And I would love for you to go deeper into that.
Sure. Well, it was pretty clear in the even at the stage where Stan had grasped the perinatal matrices, the 4 matrices, and if you read the early books and the early description of the matrices, in which he talked about the phenomenology, the qualities of experiences that people would have in each matrix, whether it was in the prenatal condition where the birth process hasn't yet started and there's more of a kind of symbiotic union with the mother, or once the contractions begin, or then the propulsion out of the birth canal, or then finally the extraordinary radical transformation of global transformation that happens with birth itself, which involves a dying to the old way of being, to the womb, to the previous mode of existence. When Stan laid out the larger range of experiences that people would have when they were undergoing when they were in a particular part of the reliving birth, he was showing how people had mythological experiences, or they had experiences from different times of their life, or from historical periods, all of which had a certain common set of qualities that united them, even though they were in so many different forms, and they were at so many different levels of experience. Some were they might be reliving a birth from seemed like another lifetime, or it could be facing death on a battlefield, or it could be experiencing being the great mother, giving birth to a new universe, etc. It was clear that there was an archetypal commonality that united all these. And of course, the idea of archetypes, it comes out of Plato and the Platonic tradition, and then it was really Jung and depth psychology in the 20th century that kind of reconnected to the way of seeing things archetypally, but Jung did it through the deep, recognizing it more through deep intrapsychic experience, while Plato had more the idea that the archetypes were the cosmic principles themselves of reality itself, while Jung was more focused on, well, this is the psyche that is formed and shaped this way. And what it kind of happened in a couple of steps. The first step was recognizing that these were archetypal patterns that were at work at the perinatal level, or sometimes it could come through in an early life, early childhood experience, or it could come through in karmic and mythic, historical types of phenomena. So first was just recognizing that there are archetypes. But then the next big step was both Stan and I had been trying to figure out how to have some anticipation of the way in which a person might respond to taking a psychedelic substance. Because for the decades that Stan had been working, starting back in the 50s and the 60s in Prague, and then the later 60s and 70s in Baltimore, Spring Grove, Maryland, the researchers had attempted to use many different types of psychological tests to see if a person who tested in a certain way on a Rorschach test or a thematic apperception test, TAT, or the MMPI, other standard psychological tests, to see whether that gave an indication of how they would respond in an LSD session, and or any other psychedelic. Though Stan's particular focus for most of those years was with LSD therapy, and none of the standard psychological tests had any predictive value. People would take the exact same substance, same dosage, and have radically different experiences. Both the same person could at different times have radically different experiences, even though they were the same therapists. They were in the same room and they were taking the same psychedelic, but it was a different time. And in other cases, like two people on the same day could have different experiences, radically different, like heaven and hell, really, that kind of polarity, as well as everything in between. So one day, I mean, Esalen was a place where many different traditions and perspectives, both ancient and modern, esoteric as well as more exoteric, were being taught by teachers and masters from around the world. It was a kind of epicenter of new ideas as well as ancient ones. And there was I think one of the things that both Stan and I really appreciated about Esalen, besides its extraordinary beauty, was its generosity of philosophical openness to many perspectives and many practices, many methods, to just explore, well, what works with. Let's not rule out anything before we experiment and see. And what happened was, at one of Stan's month-long workshops that he would organize, one of the participants, who was an artist named Arnie Tretovec, showed he also happened to be an astrologer, and he showed Stan, and he said to Stan first on his own, he said, in my experience, when people, whatever they're going through in their life, the quality of the experience they're going through correlates with where the planets are relative to where they were when a person was born, that is, to their birth chart, their horoscope. Those are called transits. The planets keep moving in relationship to the natal chart, and what planets are touching, that is geometrically lined up with what other planets in the natal chart. These give indications of what quality of experience might be going on, sometimes for a several year period, sometimes it's just for a few days at a time, depending on what planet, the speed of the movement, etc. So I think both Stan and I were relatively skeptical about astrology compared to the many other perspectives, because it just demanded such a huge shift of cosmology, really. But we were open to exploring, and Tretovec showed us how to calculate charts, how to calculate transits, and we did the calculations for our own charts and transits, and we also had the books that describe what kinds of experiences tend to go with what transits. And of course, these were written for everyday people. It wasn't written for people in psychedelic sessions. But the descriptions that were given for the kinds of transits that Stan and I were going through at different stages in our life, when we had very good records for our own psychedelic sessions, we were quite astonished by how closely the descriptions of what you would expect could happen under a certain transit fit what we went through with those sessions. So it'd be something like this could be a period of extraordinary stress. There may be the need to confront difficult family issues or something like that, emotional problems stemming from the past. Another transit could say something like, excellent for travel, experiencing new horizons opening up in your life, new ideas and perspectives, etc. So you just kind of had, as I was reading these different descriptions, I realized that really astrology is essentially dealing with archetypal principles, archetypal forces, and that each of the planets seems to have this kind of cosmic association, a fundamental underlying connection with a particular archetypes. Venus and Saturn and Mercury, Sun, Moon, Saturn, etc. And well, to make a long story short, because we lived at Esalen, which was such a great laboratory for people going through intense transformational experiences. I mean, they basically went to Esalen to have those kinds of experiences, many of which were quite challenging for them, but they had a safe vessel, a container where they could go through these things there, and also could have very extraordinary revelatory epiphanies, opening of a sense of rebirth and so forth. So we basically started doing this research with everybody that was coming through. People were just kind of lined up. This is back when I was still in my later 20s. Would be lined up to get their transits read, and then eventually I started studying well, what happened when different people had their major breakthroughs, like when Jung had his great kind of descent into the unconscious that brought forth the Red Book and really all his later ideas in the 1913, 1916, 17 period, and see those remarkable transits, or see what transits Galileo had when he turned his telescope to the heavens, or what transits Marie Curie had when she made her scientific discoveries at the turn of the 20th century, Einstein, things like that. So that's basically in a nutshell, the background to what, or the historical, the history of how our research began. And then over the years, I mean, Stan would, as he was teaching the holotropic breathwork, how to facilitate, in his training modules around the world, he would often have me come and teach with him, and people would do their breath work during the day, and then I would do their in the evening as they were doing their sharing of the excuse me, the sharing of their experience. I would show people. I would have calculated their charts during the day and look at their transits. And so as they're speaking, or after they share their experience, I would describe how that connected to the transits they were going through, and one after another. I mean, I think it was so compelling to have 20, 30 people have all this range of experiences, and they each have different charts. They're going through different transits. There's certain commonalities because the planets are in the same place in the sky relative to the Earth for everybody during this week, let's say. So there's a shared field, but that shared archetypal field gets influenced or inflected in individual ways according to how that larger current planetary set of alignments connects with their particular birth chart, which is unique. Theirs is different than the person next to them. And so we really found ourselves kind of mind-blown by the nature of the correlations and how consistent they were, how helpful they were. They gave us a handle on how to better time sessions, how to understand past sessions and current ones, how it connected with earlier times in a person's life and the transits they had then, and what was being activated. And it also gave us a different kind of worldview. I mean, basically, we recognized then that the archetypes really were, as the Platonic tradition had it, they're not just human psychological forms or forces or principles. They're cosmic. They're ontological. They're essential principles that shape the nature of being, and are related to something out in the macrocosm as well as in the microcosm of our own interior experience. So this was a kind of perinatal revelation in itself. I mean, it was a kind of sense of, I think for both of us, a sense of kind of entering into a new worldview that kind of re-enchanted the cosmos in a new way. Of course, deep transformational psychedelic experiences have that capacity on their own, the gods willing, to open up a re-enchantment of a person's perceptions, and to see they open the doors of perception, to use William Blake's phrase that Aldous Huxley used as the title of his little book about his psychedelic experiences. But the astrological or archetypal cosmos that opened up gave a new sense of just how sovereign, kind of mind-blowingly powerful and aesthetically brilliant was the cosmic intelligence that was able to make all these vast correlations happen in a kind of continual symphony of, kind of orchestration of the movements of the planets with the patterns of human experience. I remember Stan and I driving up the coast of Big Sur one time in his van. We were going into Carmel, Monterey for some supplies, and he as we were talking about the correlations, he just kind of looked over at me and shook his head and just said, "It just shatters the normal rational mind to try to wrap one's head around the how this would be possible. The level of cosmic intelligence and artistry that's at work is just way past what a finite human mind can quite comprehend." So Stan has many times said it's really like astrology kind of reveals. Astrology serves as a kind of Rosetta Stone of the human psyche. It allows us a way to see how the cosmos, the deep archetypal language of the cosmos, how we can hear it, how we can read it, how and to, in a sense, have a sense of communication between cosmos and psyche, between the great universe and the human being. So I hope that gives a little sense for what we the story of our kind of joint discoveries over the years.
Stan, do you want to add anything to that?
And I think for us, the amazing thing was that when Rick, at the time when he came to Esalen, he was working on his dissertation about psychedelic
Therapy, yeah.
Therapy, yeah. And so as he was working on this transits and so on, we were looking at a certain point, we couldn't believe that there was the correlation between the four matrices of these that I created out of analyzing it from my patients, and each was basically related to the four major archetypes.
The four outer planets, yeah.
Yeah, that was amazing because, I didn't know if there's anything about astrology, of course. And then this was already amazing. And then we found out that actually at the time, when people had a certain transit of one of these archetypes, then they actually are correlated with them.
Right.
which was
Like,
amazing, you know.
yeah. So in a sense, there's like there were two steps to the surprise of what we were uncovering. One was that so Stan had done all this. I mean, I think in many ways it's one of Stan's most fundamental and important discoveries, which is the four perinatal matrices. First of all, the whole idea that the death rebirth process has such psychotherapeutic value, that it's such an important threshold of experience and has a kind of transformational potency. But he was able to take such, just thousands of session reports and recognize that there were these patterns of four different matrices. One, the first perinatal matrix, where there's this kind of oceanic union with the mother and with the cosmos, and a sense of lack of boundaries that could both have a quality of mystical unity, but also could be experienced as a kind of disorienting groundlessness and lack of clear definitions and identity, but in its positive form was just the sense of kind of the infinite unity and sacredness of things that one was united with oneself, with the mother, with the great mother, with nature, with the divine. And then the second matrix, more the contractions have begun. There's a sense of profound loss, of being separated from the primal union, there being no way out, in great suffering of the physically and psychologically and spiritually, truly a existentialist dark night of the soul. And then the third matrix, the tremendous propulsion, the titanic energies that, as the birth canal, the cervix opens up, and the fetus, the baby, is emerging out, but is in a struggle, life and death struggle. Titanic energies, sexual, aggressive, scatological, fiery. Stan had a great term, pyrocatharsis, to describe that third matrix. I always love that. Pyrocatharsis perfectly describes it. And then the fourth matrix, the experience of sudden birth, of rebirth, the collapse of the old structures, and the potential like reconnection to the mother, to the whole, but in a new form, because a child has been born, a new reality has emerged, and the fact that each of those four matrices was connected to, I mean, every astrologer who knows their planetary meanings, the principles well, would recognize that everything that is part of the first perinatal matrix is connected to Neptune. The dissolution of boundaries, the mystical unity, but the potential for disorienting, dissolving of boundaries and identities and so forth. Or the second matrix, the contractions, the facing of death, the facing of suffering and limitations, etc. Clearly, that's Saturn, the negative side of Saturn. There's very positive sides of Saturn too, but the second matrix doesn't have anything positive about it when you're going through it, and it's just like a pure negative Saturn. And then the third matrix, Stan has often talked. You want to talk about this, Stan? Like the way in which the third matrix, it was such a surprise how the different qualities that were connected there. Do you know what I mean? In terms of, you have in one matrix, there's experiences of intense eroticism, sexuality, but also murderous rage, but also scatology.
Yes, and the underworld, of course.
Yeah, the underworld,
and mythological.
Yeah, like Hades and so forth. And
very, very unusual, yeah.
Yeah, and then also there's the encounters with sewage and the whole waste system of the earth and of the human body, encounter with scatological material that is, and then the fiery quality, the pyrocatharsis and the release, the explosiveness, the titanic energies, the fact that all those are in one matrix, and the fact that astrologers will recognize that every one of those qualities are connected to the archetypal principle of Pluto. Pluto, Hades,
and they also made sense connection, to the experience of birth.
That's right. Yeah.
Each of them related to the physiology, to the anatomy of birth.
Exactly. And then, of course, the fourth matrix, the sudden breakthrough, the illumination, the freedom. That's connected to the planet Uranus. So it was one thing to just see that this one line of research that Stan had opened up so beautifully with his recognition of the perinatal matrices, that there would be this connection to these four archetypal principles coming from a totally different interpretive symbol system of astrology, which has a whole other tradition behind it, that there would be such perfect corollary. I mean, there's nothing about each of those four matrices that doesn't perfectly fit these four planetary archetypes. That was amazing in itself. But as Stan was just saying, the most astonishing thing is that it's when people have a transit of that particular planet going across their birth chart in a significant way, that's when that particular matrix, perinatal matrix, is activated or constellated. That was like suddenly, whoa, we're not just talking about interesting parallels between two symbol systems that were arrived at independently. We're talking about the whole cosmos is being connected to what's going on in the whole inner cosmos of the human being, and that was a real revelation.
What you're describing, the importance then becomes the willingness to do the inner exploration, the breath work or psychedelic sessions or whatever technique someone uses to access this deep unconscious, these memories of the birth process, and then the awareness of the archetypes and the planetary transits, so that people can not unconsciously react, so that first of all they've become aware of their own experience of them on a very personal, profound level, but then to become aware of how we are triggered by the planetary transits. And if we're aware of our issues, and when something begins to boil in us, we might consider looking at what planet is in relationship to our birth chart to understand what's driving that.
Right. Yeah. It does give an indication of how we can recognize certain patterns and connect, and also get a sense for the time span of certain transits, and a sense that everything keeps evolving, and how current events are often connected to previous cycles that we're working out a particular complex in our life, for example. In fact, we living as many years as we did in a community that was as stable as Esalen was in the 1970s and 80s, there were people who had gone through quite dramatic and difficult experiences that they had not before they came to Esalen, and under certain transits, and then as that part of their chart would get activated during the years that they were at Esalen, by knowing that transit was coming, people could use that knowledge as an opportunity to explore the the complex, explore the coex system of memories and perhaps traumatic experiences. They could do, whether it would be Gestalt work or holotropic breath work or a sacred medicine ceremony of some kind. They could use this as an opportunity to connect with those energies, but now in a healing way rather than getting knocked over by it. I should make clear, I imagine many of our listeners today will already know this, but a couple of things that are quite important whenever one talks about the correlations between planetary movements and human experience is to recognize that to the best of our knowledge, this is not a matter of the planets physically exerting some kind of material causal force on us the way, say, gravity or electromagnetic radiation might be another kind of parallel or metaphor. It's just not like that. It's not this kind of brute force or billiard ball universe of the Newtonian Cartesian type. It's much more of a sense that meaning, archetypal meanings go all the way down, and the cosmos as well as the human psyche. The human psyche is part of a cosmic psyche that, and as the great Platonic philosopher Plotinus said, everything is interconnected. All things breathe together, and there is something. And he was trying to explain how he saw the planets relating to our experiences at the unfolding of our lives, and he didn't see it as a mechanistic thing. This is back in the period of the Roman Empire when he was teaching, and he was very eloquent. Everything breathes together. I think that perfectly captures. I mean, the breathing together suggests the kind of overall interdependent holistic cosmos that we are all participating in. And we all have the sense when there's something in the air, where there's a kind of archetypal field. Obviously, we've all been through a very powerful archetypal field over the last couple of years here, which is closely connected to, basically, there's been a Saturn-Pluto conjunction and moving into the square to Uranus. And I gave a couple of presentations for those who are interested for CIS over this year on this. One was called What's Happening in the Stars Right Now, and the other was called Richard Tarnas on the Planets in 2021. And they basically kind of briefly looked at the global archetypal dynamics of our time. And to put it in a nutshell, we basically have been going through a kind of, and continue to go through, a period in which there are these volcanic pressures for the radical reconfiguration or transformation of all life structures. Just tremendous pressure for that kind of, a kind of death and rebirth of a dying to our old identity, our old way of being, the way human civilization has imposed itself on the larger Earth community, and having to rethink what is our relationship to the Earth community of many species, of many forms of life, and the very geology of the planet is now in a reactive mode that is related to our kind of separative activities as an industrial civilization, so technologically empowered. So I think this gets into the other main topic that we were going to address today, which is the relevance of Stan's insights and of the archetypal astrological correlations as well to our understanding of the great kind of crisis of our time, whether we understand this particularly in terms of the climate crisis and the mass extinction of species and the threat to human life on so many levels right now, but also how connected that is to matters of ecological justice, of the way in which human beings treat each other as well as treat other species. And I think Stan, you might want to speak about this a little bit, Stan, but I think this has been an interesting area of dialogue between the two of us as to how we understand our moment in history. And maybe you'd like to speak a little bit about how you have seen the perinatal energies that in some sense haven't been integrated by humanity collectively or individually in most cases, how they get activated and acted out in the world in a way that reproduces the perinatal crisis for the whole for our time, for our human species as a whole. Would you like to say a little bit about that?
I will try. Now, see, for some time, when people are having psychedelic experiences, they very frequently look at what's happening in the world, and they have a sense that we are like a crossroad, between destruction or major rebirth. And this one situation, if we continue doing what we have been doing, that we might not make it. We might take quite a few of these species with us. And on the other hand, if we could really turn the situation inside and we start doing a lot of transformation, in the transformation, we might reach another species. I've seen quite a few people who have done repeatedly these kinds of experiences in a very reasonable way that have almost a different quality of another species. They cannot imagine, for example, that that violence is acceptable, to resolve conflicts, or that we can do what we do with the destruction of water, what we do with the air, what we do with the earth that we're growing on. We are insane. And it's almost with different people. You can't imagine that they would be doing what we have been doing in the world.
Yeah, so it's like you're pointing to the need for as many individuals as possible to do the inner work, go deeply inward and access both the traumatic memories as well as the healing transformational intelligence that's at work within their own psyche, go through those experiences so that they don't keep blindly acting out those destructive energies in the world, and also drawing towards them in the way we synchronistically draw towards us events that fit our inner gestalt. We don't draw towards us catastrophic situations as a way to reproduce the perinatal crisis, because the more one has made the perinatal experience, death and birth, and brought that to consciousness, the less likely one will be to unconsciously create circumstances that have mortal peril, that are catastrophic in nature. So we stop being puppets of the archetypes and puppets of our own unconscious drives because we've done the inner work to bring it more, to release it. As you said to me many years ago, the full experience of an emotion is the funeral pyre of that emotion. You by bringing fear or hatred or rage into full consciousness and allow it to, in a safe way, kind of be released through the body, through the voice, into consciousness. It's released. It's burned up on the altar, as it were, of consciousness, and then there's a sense of being kind of cleansed of that energy and not driven by it in that compulsive way. Yeah, I think was a really great insight on your part of the historical collective importance of doing this kind of inner journeying.
Rick, I should say that when was the conference in San Francisco, and Rick Dudley, I gave the talk, which was about psychedelic and future, and there's a whole list on it. What I have seen, how people change as a result of not just psychedelics, but what I call psychedelic experiences, also breath work, or some people with spiritual experiences, crises, and so on.
The holotropic experience.
Holotropic experiences, yeah. So it's all major changes that people do without, we are not teaching them to do it, they just, and they go through really good experiences properly, they just start moving in a certain direction. They have different kind of worldview, they have different values and so on. And all of them would be something that would create a much better world.
Right.
And future, of the world. Yeah.
Yes, and each in an individual way too. It's like each person has a different. I mean, there's common features to their new worldview, their new values, but there's the zest for life, the greater compassion, the empathy for diverse ways of being alive and so forth. But at the same time, there's an individuality. Each person flowers in a different way, and one person becomes devoted to saving the whales, and another person is focused on stopping fossil fuel depredation of the earth, and so forth. Each person
Sure.
has their own calling, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think
it's commonality, all of them, but in a different ways.
Right. Exactly. So I think that's one extraordinary insight that you brought. How if we don't do this kind of work, inner work, there's a tendency to create very critical circumstances that can be, very destructive and catastrophic. And of course, that happens on the individual level. In the case of a person who's, can start to, if they've got a perinatal crisis, if they have perinatal energies activated, also related to early childhood traumas of various kinds, could be abandonment, could be bullying and choking experiences or whatever. There's a tendency, if they're not working with it consciously, there's a tendency to create interpersonal circumstances that are very unstable, a lot of conflict, and life as one crisis after another in a more interpersonal way. But what you were pointing out is that when a whole civilization our whole civilization as a whole doesn't have rites of passage, sacred rites of passage that indigenous and traditional cultures did for millennia, and which your work is bringing a kind of contemporary form of through depth psychology, psychedelic therapy, holotropic breathwork, and so forth. And I often think of you as being a kind of high priest of the death rebirth mysteries from ancient times that somehow got reincarnated in as a psychoanalyst in mid 20th century Europe. Well, I think what you've pointed out is that when a whole civilization is acting without having integrated these kinds of energies, it can be quite catastrophic, because particularly if it's technologically empowered and you have an industrial civilization with technological capacities that can wreak havoc, which we're now seeing. So many unintended consequences can come out of our kind of human ego-driven, technologically empowered agency in the world. So, go ahead.
What I was saying before, that for some time, people who were having experiences, psychedelic experiences, they were talking about this crossroad, either destruction or some different world. And now the last time, with the COVID and so on, what happened, it's now very real. It's not a fantasy that something like this might happen. I mean, we are in it.
That's right. COVID really, in some sense, gave the world an advanced anticipation of a collective death, a collective encounter with mortality that particularly, I think, speaking as an American, Americans tend to be in denial about, or I don't want to say all Americans, but many, and certainly in the administration of the last 4 years, just tremendous denial about the negative impact of our way of being on the larger Earth, in the larger Earth community. And the COVID pandemic, in a sense, gave us a more intimate and immediate experience of something that is happening in a slower motion way of the climate crisis and the larger threat to humanity and many other species that this represents. So I think there's the possibility that there could be more cooperation among many nations to deal with larger crises than may have existed before. I mean, seeing just in the last few days the urge for the wealthier countries to bring vaccines, freely give them to the rest of the world. I mean, much more has to be done in that direction, but at least this shows some gesture towards the larger human community.
Well, and also the virus showed us that there is no boundaries, no borders. I mean, we're all one planet and one humanity. I think that has shown that very much. I mean, when I grew up, it was like we had a saying, what does it matter for me if a sack of rice is falling in China, And so suddenly it's like, in the beginning I thought this is in China, but suddenly it was clear. I mean, the air is everywhere. We are one planet and one humanity. So I think that was a big teaching about that.
That's so true.
Better, with Chernobyl, and we saw it.
Yes.
Other things.
But this is really, the most.
It's amazing.
Global.
Kind of
most global.
Consciousness and humanity.
All the national boundaries dissolved.
yeah, it's all interconnected, which is a deep truth anyway. And also the people who have done a deep inner exploration have also reported experiences that it feels like a death rebirth process that can be worked on individually, but it's also connected to the outside world. So the connection between, not only between everybody in the world, but also between the inner world and the outer world, I think was getting really clear in that situation.
Yeah. I think the fact that we have had this experience, I think one way of looking at it is that we are being propelled. If there is a larger intelligence at work, a larger healing intelligence at work in each of us as an individual, but I think this is also true of us as a planetary community, there does seem to be a way in which we are being put through a kind of initiatory transformation that, in other words, it's not just a matter of return of the repressed and what we're in denial of in our unconscious. It's also that it's as if all of humanity has entered into a kind of rite of passage that, and none of us are entirely outside the system. We're all in it. I mean, each of us is having to be a participant in it. And I think the beauty of what your work and your life work has done, Stan, and you, Brigitte, I just have the greatest respect for both of you over so many decades of devoting yourself to the healing of individuals by kind of midwifing their transformational processes, their birthings, and being so generous with your care in helping people hour after hour, day after day, year after year, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of ultimately of people to go through these powerful transformational experiences. And I think the beauty of what you have taught to so many people is that when they have these experiences, they access a sense of trust that even in a crisis, something deeper is happening that could have, even when it looks like everything's going in the wrong direction, as it must have looked to the baby being born, like, wait a minute, I'm losing the only universe I've ever known. And to the extent that it could conceptualize anything, the maternal womb was my whole cosmos, and now this is expelling me and causing me great suffering too. I can't breathe. I'm no oxygen's coming in. I'm being pushed out, expelled from everything, and then to have that open up to birth and to spiritual rebirth, it can provide a kind of underlying trust in the universe, a trust in life, a trust in death even, and that can't come in any other way. It has to come in that kind of intimate experiential way. And I think the more people who have that level of experience, those people can provide a kind of stable equilibrium of trust and hope for the larger numbers of people around them. I mean, we need heroic communities as well as individuals who are carrying this greater sense of the mystery of death and rebirth and the deep spiritual intelligence that informs life. And I think you have really helped countless people have that kind of experience, that they could have emerge in them this kind of primal sense of of trust and faith in the larger goodness of life and of the cosmos.
Yeah.
That's so
You know
beautifully
what's
said.
made some of the things. Sorry.
No, I'll let you go, Stan. I'll follow up after.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the kind of transformation that many people have after good psychedelic sessions, they also sometimes had a near-death experiences, very similar kind of transformation. And so it would have experienced what happens in the world today, about millions of people, who are dying or being very close to death. And what's interesting that it was actually the choking that was a significant part of the problems. With oxygens and so on. And,
Yeah.
But I think a very interesting element in the pandemic, in the COVID, is that it's about not being able to breathe. I mean,
Yes.
first of all with the mask, and then also when you actually people have it, and I mean it's going
Yes.
on the breathing. So I think it's so perinatal, and I
Completely.
think it also was activating at the perinatal level in people. So that would probably explain the reactions that were kind of very irrational with some people. And so that was again this correlation between the inner death rebirth and the outer situation. Very amazing. I've never experienced that kind of thing in my whole life. I'm 61 now, and I know I'm very luckily have lived so long without having to go through a war or all these horrible things that most people humans have to suffer. So it was the first time, and I will always remember that moment when the whole planet was standing still, and that was just so amazing. I don't think this ever happened before in that global form, and it felt like we were like kind of falling out of the everyday life trance, and it was like in one sense an awakening, and also now seeing, when I look at what's happening now, we get so appreciative of being able to see people or touch people or hug people, things like that. So it's kind of by not being able to do that for a while, we took it all for granted, and now it's like this rebirth slowly starting. I mean, I say it's like when you see the first flower after German winter, you get really appreciative. If you live in Hawaii and you have flowers all the time, you like them, but when you've had all this lack of that, you get so appreciative, and I feel like a little bit that's going on right now. So this is the Uranian,
that's beautifully said.
Saturn kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Rick, I think what would be very interesting if psychiatrists, psychologists would look at it for all over the world now, what people would be experiencing as a result of coming through this crisis.
Yeah, I think there is starting to be.
Many of them really had the near-death experiences. So interesting to look at it psychologically.
Yeah,
how it transformed people.
Yeah. Yvonne, my wife, who's a Jungian analyst, she is definitely seeing things in her patients, what this year has meant, and there has been. I mean, you described it beautifully, Brigitte. That kind of sudden the dropping out of the normal way of life, modus vivendi, just the earth stops, and we're all in something together, but we're also all radically separate from each other suddenly, and we have to be very cautious with each other, and masked, or not touching, or 6 feet away, or not coming out of our homes, doing everything long distance. And I was thinking about how your recognition that that both of you are bringing up about how the breathing, you can't, the COVID patient in the ICU unit is intensive care unit is in a crisis of not being able to get their breath, and how we're all in this together, and how that the idea of during this year after the horrific murder of George Floyd and the widespread embrace of the idea, like, I can't breathe, that of, in this case, of Black people feeling oppressed by police, by racist structures of society, how they can't breathe, they can't live freely, and how perinatal that is. But now suddenly everybody watching for 8-9 minutes this death happen, brought it in a visceral way, so that people of around the world of many races were out on the streets to say this is not, this can't go on. That in turn connects to the fact that the planet as a whole, with the burning down of the rainforests and the oxygen level of the whole planet being affected, there's ways in which Plotinus's quotation of everything breathes together is relevant to all these different ways of describing the perinatal crisis that we're going through. And again, the beauty of the archetypal cosmology that has kind of emerged, which of course has been carried by other civilizations in the past, but in a whole new way is emerging now. You could say that we're recognizing that there is an underlying unity of field that we are all participating in, and that we not only can we as different nations can't separate themselves out and, well, we're safe and the rest of you may get COVID. Well, that's not the way it works. All the boundaries are dissolved. We're all breathing together. And so this is also true on the ecological level, not just not just in terms of the epidemiology, but the ecology of the planet is also, we're all breathing together there. But at the cosmic level, it seems that we're all breathing together with the cosmos, and I think this is one in terms of archetypal meanings and purposes that are working through, and the fact that the outer planets seem to have something to do with the perinatal matrices in such a fundamental way, and that we've kind of discovered these outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, in the modern period through the telescope, makes me think that in some sense the cosmos is opening up its deeper meanings to us in such a way that we're perhaps being asked to go through a death rebirth as a species, as a civilization, a kind of perinatal awakening, moving into a more, say, galactic consciousness. I mean, this is kind of speculation on my part, but it does, the parallels of everything breathing together do seem to go right across all these different fields of human experience.
Well, that actually aligns very much with Mayan philosophy, beginning with 2012, and the idea of this new period of humanity, where this is a transformational period. We're being asked to transform into something more refined. Past periods were organized through elements: air, fire, water, earth, maybe alternating between masculine and feminine. And this next phase is considered neutral, and the element is ether. And so this idea that humanity is being forced, actually. It is the nature of the cosmos to evolve, cosmogenesis. And so we're part of it. And what's so beautiful about the work that both of you have brought is Stan, the tools and techniques to go through this process, and Brigitte, how you carry it forward, and what you add with body work, and then Rick, what you offer theoretically, how you're able to provide this understanding of cosmic forces that we experience as archetypes. And when we can participate with this knowledge and understanding, then it's so less frightening, and it allows us to grow into it. And this becomes an opportunity and not a terrifying, process. So.
Yeah, if I could just add, that's well put, Susan. And if I could just pull out one thread that we didn't quite address that I think is so important, is that the one of the things that we came to recognize is that these planetary archetypes and the transits are not they're not kind of determinative in a fatalistic way. Rather, it's the nature of archetypes to have a kind of spectrum of related meanings, but that field of meanings that is united by this archetypal essence can manifest in ways that are creative or destructive, or that can be profound or trivial. They can be benign or malign, and that's where human freedom comes in, where our own agency comes in. So knowledge of these larger forces that are at work, and also a sense for what archetypal powers are constellated at what time and in what combinations, and how my particular life is getting having these influences activated in a particular time. All these give us they can be quite liberating at the same time as being a responsibility, because it's up to us how we co-creatively express these energies. We're not just puppets of them, and that's the beauty of becoming more conscious of them, is that we can become more skillful participants in the drama of life.
Beautifully said. Jim, I can't thank you enough for giving me the opportunity to bring these two amazing people together, and for Brigitte to also contribute her valuable insights. This has just been lovely to see this lovely conversation and the amazing insights that have come out of it. Thank you so much. Thank
you. Rick, I just love the workings of your mind, my friend. I just, you have a rarefied intelligence, and the fact that you and Stan have been working together for 47 years, that's quite something. It's and Brigitte, the way you've come in and brought Stan into his ultimate phase of happiness. I just want to acknowledge as we bring this session to a close. And I think the one comment I would make about your treatment of the pandemic, I think in all the sessions we've had on Humanity Rising, what you all have said over the last 10, 15 minutes about the pandemic is possibly the deepest and most comprehensive. You know, we've had many sessions on the pandemic from the point of view of politics or public health or economics or the vaccines and all that controversy. And there've been like the blind men, looking at the elephant. But I think in these last a few minutes, we've seen the elephant in its most profound cosmic way. And so I just want to acknowledge the depth of your observation about this extraordinary rite of passage that humanity is going through. It's like we're moving through the perinatal complexio. And as you say, Susan, this is what the cosmos does. We're being compelled, like every baby, through that birth canal, because that's what the cosmos does. And I think the the one observation I would make about all the sessions so far, Stan, is along the following lines. You know, if you look at most of the so-called great thinkers of our time, even since the Enlightenment, most of them are going to be swept away by whatever's going to happen next in the human journey that stands as a great judgment of everything that humanity has done to itself and to the environment, such that it has put us on the precipice of self-destruction. You think of Marx, for example, or Adam Smith, so-called great minds, but they're being smashed now against the bedrock, the anvil of the fact that they never once thought about the environment, and therefore unleashed in all their greatness a destructive impulse that is destroying us. And that great reckoning, it seems to me, is upon the very edifice of human modernity. And I want to raise this because of the story that, Rick, you told about Stan's work. And that is that, in contradistinction to most of the other great thinkers and actors, the affirmation that Stan is being given about the totality of his work is that it's not only in deep alignment with the human psyche, but it's in deep alignment with the cosmos itself, as manifested by the affirmation, Stan, that is coming from your work. And I would add, Rick, your work, and Brigitte, what you've been doing. You're being affirmed at this moment in time because you intuitively have understood that the deepest truth emanates out of alignment with the natural whole. And even though you backed into it, neither of you knew much about astrology, the fact that what you were doing was affirmed by astrology and has been affirmed by the life process itself that frames human life on Earth. I think as we bring your celebration to its penultimate moment, Stan, is the highest accolade that I think is possible about one's life and contribution into the world. So I just want to acknowledge that we're bearing witness to an intelligence that has intuited such a deep resonance with cosmic purpose that it has enlightened people all over the world and will continue to do so. Because what is heretical and of a maverick, innovative nature in an orthodoxy that is collapsing becomes foundational in the orthodoxy that is emerging. And I think that's how the history will be written, my dear friend, on your work and your life. And I just want to acknowledge that and thank you, Rick, for bringing that deep nuance into our celebratory session today. So thank you. Thank you very, very much. And we're going to have one more session, the grand finale, on Stan's actual birthday, on the 1st of July, that Brigitte and Susan have been preparing. And we'll say more about that closer to the time. And I would say, actually, in our next session of Humanity Rising on Monday, we're going to be talking about dreams. It caught our attention very early on that scientists were telling us that people's dreams were becoming more lucid and more dimensionalized. So we've been tracking dreams through our Chartres dream team. And so our next session is going to be on the dreams of the pandemic and how they've illuminated our lives. But Susan, thank you. You have been unbelievable in your orchestration of this celebration. I mean, I feel like you dropped out of heaven and helped just make this all happen. And Rick, you were at the first one with Michael Murphy, and now you're in the last one. And the throughput has been, Brigitte and Stan sitting there in the center, just smiling away, taking it all in and gracing us with their wisdom. So I thank you all. And I'll bring this session now to a close. So we'll see you all again on Monday, everyone, for Humanity Rising. Same time, same station, as we celebrate the rising of humanity at this extraordinary moment when to rise is the only option we have left to save ourselves. Thank you all so much.